Be wary of heretics while wielding unyielding authority. We'll take a quick peek at Eisenhorn Xenos. Eisenhorn Xenos is a third-person action game by Pixel Hero Games, and based off of a novel with the same name. It's the first in a series of novels set in Games Workshop's Warhammer 40k universe that follow Gregor Eisenhorn, Inquisitor for the Imperium of Man. There have been a plethora of games within the Warhammer universes, be it in a fantasy setting or the grim dark depths of science fiction with Warhammer 40k. Developers have been licensing these properties since around 1997, with many being focused on translating Warhammer's tabletop roots to a digital form. Final Liberation Warhammer Epic 40k and 1998's Warhammer 40k Chaos Gate were some of the first, but by far from the last. There's been everything from turn-based strategy games to RTSs with shooters of every color and even a game based off of chess. Even with the extended backlog of products, if there's anything that is known about Warhammer games, it's that you just never can tell exactly what you're going to get. Games Workshop has slowly been opening up their restrictions with the franchise over the years. Everyone from Sega to first-time developers have taken a crack at profiting from Warhammer's familiar branding. This leads to a huge variety and quality with games that bear the Warhammer moniker, with many being just mediocre at best. And this is where we get to Eisenhorn Xenos. As someone who's read and is a fan of the Eisenhorn series of books, it was exciting to hear that a game based on them was in production, but the game's announcement was also somewhat troubling. Pixel Hero Games had only one title under their belt at the time, the first chapter of a mobile game called Spiral Episode 1. Spiral attempted to bring a 3D console experience to the mobile iOS marketplace, and this is the experience Pixel Hero wanted to bring to Eisenhorn. Eisenhorn Xenos was developed for both PC and mobile devices simultaneously. This focus on two widely different markets and machines caused Pixel Hero Games to constantly compromise with their ideas as well as with their budget. Unlike Fireproof Games with The Room 2, Xenos' PC version is not an update or remastered build of the game from its mobile version. It's very clear from the game's graphics and animation quality that mobile was put first and foremost, which is honestly a shame since Xenos has some really good art direction. Personally, I've always enjoyed the ridiculousness of 40k's grim, dark depiction of the future. It's a mix of gothic ideas and architecture with interstellar science fiction that makes for some truly unique design. It's great to be able to get an up-close and somewhat personal look at the universe's intricate engravings and machines, opposed to the zoomed-out approach of other Warhammer titles. It's just a shame that what you do get to see isn't as highly detailed nor given the full quality it longs for. Anything in Xenos that gets too intricate tends to have difficulty rendering properly when it comes to some of the game's architecture, while other less interesting parts of the game show up fine but just aren't that interesting to look at. I do have to give credit to Pixel Hero Games for how closely they kept to the source material with Xenos, as the game follows the events of the book fairly well. Pixel Hero manages to get across most story elements while also incorporating different types of gameplay, for better or for worse. Xenos knows exactly what kind of gameplay it wants to have, and that's the free-flow combat system of Rocksteady's Batman Arkham games. The problem is that Pixel Hero wasn't exactly sure how to do that kind of combat correctly. Xenos uses a very basic form of the free-flow combat system with an emphasis on timed counterattacks, as well as dodge rolls to keep Eisenhorn alive. As an Inquisitor, Eisenhorn is trained in both melee and ranged combat, while your basic enemies specialize in either one or the other. Regardless of their weapon of choice, enemies will always telegraph their attacks, giving players ample time to dodge or counterattack before they do anything. Hitting a melee enemy with a counter will block their attack, while hitting a ranged enemy will cause them to have to re-aim their shot. Ranged combat can be useful for picking off weak thugs outside of Eisenhorn's range, but it's clear that the main focus is melee combat. Guns deal little damage in comparison, and bullets are extremely limited. Gregor can only carry a few bullets with him at a time, and the only way to get more is from defeating ranged enemies. There's a bunch of different guns to buy and equip from the game's in-game store, as well as swords and character enhancements, but I never really found any of them to make that much of a difference. The upgrade shop only gives you vague symbols for weapon stats and doesn't really say what the symbols mean. I'm mostly focused on the shotgun as it let me hit multiple enemies at once and better fit with the close-ranged execution animations, as well as the chainsword because it just looks so dang cool. After all, Eisenhorn is an inquisitor and won't hesitate to swiftly deal with heretics, unless, they happen to be essential to the plot. Players can also use the shop to pick and equip their party members, even though that doesn't really make a difference. Eisenhorn can have 2 different party members with him at a time, one who participates in combat and another who grants passive buffs. Combat partners do nothing but die as their AI is horrible and they are useless. Passive party members don't participate in combat and I never noticed their buffs really anyway. So overall, the partner system is a waste of time. Both ranged and melee combat is expanded upon with Eisenhorn's Pause for Breath ability. This ability slowly charges over time as you do damage and lets Gregor pause the game and select a specific target to attack. Gregor can only target one enemy at a time while using Pause for Breath, but if he's in the right place at the right time, you can manage to hit multiple enemies at once. Basic sword attacks can also hit more than one target, which is helpful for stun-locking enemies, but the free-flow combat system means that it's difficult to target specific foes outside of Pause for Breath. There's some kind of combo thing players can do by timing attacks correctly to help charge Pause for Breath quicker than just button mashing. I didn't really see a difference from what I played, honestly, because more than not, trying to time the combos correctly caused me to take damage that I would have otherwise avoided. It is sometimes possible to avoid combat altogether by utilizing stealth mode. Stealth is about as unoriginal as Xenos' combat, and is reminiscent of Ubisoft properties such as Assassin's Creed and Watch Dogs of all things. Gregor can also use a handy little device called the Auspex to hack and interfere with specific mechanisms. While in stealth mode, the Auspex will temporarily disable Flying Skull servitors who will notify the guards of Eisenhorn's location if they spot him. The Auspex can also turn on loudspeakers to distract guards and cause grates to explode? Somehow? Not exactly sure how that works, but it happens in Watch Dogs too, so why not? As the game takes place within the fantastical future of Warhammer 40k, Gregor Eisenhorn is not only an Inquisitor with unlimited authority and in-depth combat training, but he also has some psychic abilities at his disposal. While in stealth mode, Eisenhorn can turn on his psychic vision to not only see nearby enemies, but also get their attention, causing them to move towards his current location. This is very useful for separating groups of guards as well as getting them within range for an assassination, but not every guard will fall for it. Psychic abilities can also be used somewhat in combat to force your will upon your enemies by knocking them over. Unfortunately, unlike in stealth mode, psychic abilities only work at close range in combat, and they are very inconsistent if they will even work at all. Honestly, you might as well just attack the guy with your sword if you're close enough to use your will on him. Personally, I found the game to be generally easy in either modes of conflict, be it stealth or combat. The only real penalty for getting spotted in stealth mode is being thrown into combat mode, and there was only one instance I came across where getting caught caused reinforcements to show up. Combat is relatively simple and somewhat mindless. The only challenge I really had was after playing Xenos on its highest difficulty setting. Ramping up the difficulty ramps up the damage Eisenhorn will take, and while that's usually not a problem, it can be when it comes to boss fights. Boss fights exist in stark contrast to the rest of the combat encounters throughout Xenos, and it's kind of ridiculous. The first boss is a huge pain in the butt, and it really does not get better as the game goes on. You'll never fight any of them on their own, and they all have ranged attacks that are difficult to dodge while doing tons of damage. They all play out in a similar fashion. There's a beginning phase with the boss shooting at you in a first wave of enemies, followed by a second wave of enemies while the boss switches to mostly aggressive melee combat and knockback attacks. It's very easy to get overrun with enemies as well as quickly gunned down by these bosses, especially since the only way to regain health in this game is by finding and activating one-time use panels that are generally rare. I particularly found the fights with Mandragore to be the most annoying and the most difficult. That does make some sense considering he's a Chaos Marine and they're supposed to be really tough within the Warhammer lore, but the boss fights end up being much more obnoxious than they do fun. Lore is something that Xenos does try to do well, but I found it mostly lacking. Bouts of combat are separated by long and in-depth cutscenes or scripted events portraying the events of the book, but the game doesn't really do anything to fill the gaps outside of the novel. It also doesn't help that the game doesn't cover some of the events from the book while referencing those events later on. Throughout the game, players will come across data slates that can be collected to fill in some of the gaps, such as Bentacor's wild chase in Gudrun. It would have been great to see more of these data slates hidden throughout the game with information about the rest of the 40k universe. There are many dead-end areas that look like they would have some kind of collectible in them, such as a data slate or even maybe some cash, but they just don't. They have nothing at all. Not all of the missing content from the book is told through data slates, however. There's one particular part during a torture scene when a character named Loke damages the nerves in Eisenhorn's face beyond repair. In the book, Loke specifically says to Eisenhorn that he'll never smile again, and while that line is referenced by Eisenhorn later, it's never actually said within the game itself. There are other instances, such as the level on the planet Damask, where a character is missing entirely and the events are changed around a lot. That's the same level that incorporates guards who explode if they discover you, with that explosion always hitting Eisenhorn regardless of how far away from it he is. The long scripted sequences and cutscenes are great to see as someone who's enjoyed the book, but somebody who hasn't read the book or is disinterested in the story would probably find them more annoying than anything else. It also doesn't help that the voice acting is generally terrible. Gregor Eisenhorn is probably the best casted character within Eisenhorn Xenos. His voice actor plays the role perfectly, not only sounding as I would imagine him to sound, but speaking in a way that really brings Gregor to life.
All my life, I have had a reputation for being cold, unfeeling. I am not, but I possess a singular force of will. To feel pain, fear, or grief is a luxury I cannot afford.
Everyone else, on the other hand, are rather hit and miss. Loink and Amos are generally alright, but Bentacor's voice actor has basically no emotion to what he says. Ever. Regardless of the situation he's in.
Loink is waiting for you in the room below us.
Datso's voice is horrible.
But how many with such intriguing female company?
Glaw sounds drunk.
For a grain merchant from Smeta, it surely must be.
Maxilla has horrible delivery, and iClone. Oh, iClone. Not only is the sound quality of his lines lower than the rest of the game, but his voice is really odd and not anywhere near as professional as Eisenhorn.
You're dead, you know, Gregor. Dead like they all are. Step out and make it quick.
Pixel Hero also has a bit of a bad habit of adding unneeded effects to some of the characters' voices, such as Mandragore, which just makes them sound horrible.
We're not here to offer you surety, Flesh Blister. Only death.
Problems aren't limited to the game's voice work. Oh no, let's take some time to talk about bugs and glitches. This guy I assassinated got back up after the animation of me breaking his neck, only to be alerted and start fighting me. These guards don't respond to me being right in front of them. These guards are somehow unalerted after I was in combat with a guard right behind them. And Eisenhorn froze here in midair while going through his climbing animation, making me have to restart the game. There was one particular segment on the Saruthi planet that I fell through the world, but I missed catching footage of it, so you'll just have to take my word on that. But it did happen, though. It's real. Overall, I was generally unimpressed with Eisenhorn's Xenos. Everything it did well, from its art design to its faithful adaptation of the novel, give or take a few parts, was offset by uninspired combat and really bad voice acting. Gameplay parts between conflict and story were reduced to annoying non-puzzles, such as navigating mazes filled with flammable poison gas and exploding crystals, to navigating the side of a hotel while dodging fire from a giant industrial engine. Why are there giant industrial engines on the side of a hotel? That doesn't make any sense. There's a hacking minigame that you have to beat to hack some objects, while other objects are hacked automatically. If you fail the minigame, there's no kind of penalty besides having to do it again. There's a part where Eisenhorn is locked in a room and has to unlock a password door by trial and error, since there aren't any clues as to what the password is anywhere in the room. And due to the need to simplify the game to work on mobile devices, many scenes that are supposed to be both epic and grand are left dull and mute. This particular scene where you're meeting with a high-up on a planet is supposed to have a huge crowd and council around him, but instead, it just has what is basically a laugh track. I did, however, enjoy my time with the game. Well, some of it. It was great to be able to see a visual version of characters and places, as well as events from Eisenhorn's Xenos after having read the book myself. And I did get some enjoyment out of the gameplay while figuring out how to get through areas undetected as quickly as possible. Still, I wouldn't recommend this game to someone who hasn't at least read the book. If you have read it, then you may be interested in giving the game a try, if not for only being able to experience the story in a new way, as well as listening to Eisenhorn's fantastic voice. It really is casted just perfectly. I find it amazing how his voice is so right, while the others are just so very wrong. Thanks for watching. Please let me know what you think about this game or the video in the comments section. I'm MegapieMan, and I'll talk to you guys later. Released on mobile devices in 2013, but it wouldn't be until 2016 that Fireproof would be ready to release the game on PC. Fireproof Games was determined to give the Room 2 the same kind of overhaul that gave the first game, and rebuilt it from the ground up for its PC.